Hey, did you guys see the statement from Anthropic that had an incident or an issue? Let me read this to you. We believe this is the first documented case of a large-scale cyber attack executed without substantial human intervention.
So today we're talking about your worst nightmares coming true. AI hacking everyone.
This is the DTF Cyber Podcast. I'm Damien.
This is Troy.
I'm Fern. Let's go. Now, I might have been asleep when this happened. I didn't read the full report, but as a common folk, as an average Fern, I'm just going to tell you what I think happened. I'm going to tell you, based on the headlines, what I think happened. There's a group of bad actors that were using Claude to do a bunch of their dirty work. But the interesting part about this is normally when stuff like this is done, well, let me take a step back. Whenever I'm using like a chat GPT or something, I'm sitting there typing, hey, help me with this, right? Boom, answer, right? Now, that's been fully automated. There is no person touching anything except for certain like critical points along this, we'll call it a chain of like logic, if you will. And essentially they just like set it and forget it. Like clap on, clap off, like go hack. Is that fair?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's the kill chain. You know, you think about the different steps where you start with reconnaissance and then you move into the deliverable of the exploit and so on. You know, usually there's specific steps, and we've seen the cybercrime industry kind of segment themselves off, like initial access brokers and others who specify or specifically do one step in that chain. And here you have AI able to kind of start to finish, take an attack from the reconnaissance phase all the way through execution and exfiltration and command and control. So I think that, you know, we've known AI has been involved in a lot of the attacks recently, whether it's to enable the threat actors to move faster, to reverse engineer a malware exploit, or just to, you know, quickly spread to thousands and thousands of computers once they do make initial entry. But this was very disturbing because it was an entire kill chain from start to finish orchestrated by AI. And so I think it's kind of a tell about what we're up against and also what the future looks like.
I'm over here trying to get recipes on ChatGPT. And like these people are just out here just
Well, it was just about time. We keep asking, when's this going to happen? I think one of the things that we've always known is that attackers are using AI more and more, right? Why wouldn't they? Makes them more efficient.
Yeah, it makes it where the Nigerian prince is like nowadays, if you ever try and get like gift cards or you try and Nigerian print someone, like that just is like, oh, like you're obviously new to this, right? You just started.
That's so yesterday.
Yeah, that was so 2000s, right? That was last century.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe the Nigerian prince happened because they really were in Nigeria and they didn't have AI to disguise their accent or their image if they're hacking from Nigeria, right? But now they can be in Nigeria and they can look like anybody else, your next door neighbor with no accent.
And there's no issues because, you know, obviously like the misspelling, the like out of or the non-natural speaking like syntax, right? So this is like pretty high level. So my first thought is like that, like I said, it sounds like Skynet, where it's just instead of the machines taking over and saying, oh, you know, blow everything up, it's someone is now telling the machine to just blow everything up. So
I don't even know if they're saying to go blow it up. I think that what they're saying is, hey, I want to break in here, go do it, without any instruction to how to break in. So I think that's where it's scary, right? So if you're going to have this bot that breaks into a house, you might tell it, go break in this window or break down this door. But in this case, you just tell the AI, hey, I want access to that house.
Figure it out.
Yeah. It just figures it out on its own.
Yeah, one of the scariest things, or actually one of the hardest things for a hacker, even when you get into an environment, is to kind of work your way around and figure out the lay of the land or the topology. How many endpoints are there? Where are the servers at? Where do they keep the crown jewels? I mean, these are things, steps that take over months of a period of time to figure out, low and slow, and you just try to decipher where things are. Can you imagine now the machines being able to talk to each other in a language that the AI understands that maybe even humans don't? So we're talking about machine to machine AI being able to ascertain information about the depth and breadth of the network, how many endpoints are out there, what kind of data is being stored on these endpoints or servers or data stores. It's very scary in that fact that, it's just speed. Hackers now have at their fingertips weaponized artificial intelligence that can speak machine code to machine code and move quickly to identify assets, data, and so on. And so now you're just reducing that time of exposure from, weeks down to hours, minutes, seconds. And so what does that mean on the flip side? The first responders or the incident response people have to be able to detect quickly and be able to isolate machines faster to stop this spread. So what you're going to see, in my opinion, is an arms race, AI against AI, good versus bad. You mentioned ChatGPT. There are guardrails in place that will not allow a ChatGPT or some other, professional LLMs to do this malicious type work. But there are custom LLMs, especially if it's in a Chinese threat actor's hands, that can be tailored to learn and get better every single day, every single second on how to facilitate these attacks, to move quicker, to move laterally, to identify assets, data, and exfiltrate it before you can even blink your eyes.
Yeah, looking at this specifically, right? So they weaponized Claude. And now that's not a Chinese LLM at all.
No.
It's one of the mainstream ones. And then the way they kind of weaponized it was they really broke down the attack into different segments. So I guess if you're scanning for malicious code, you wouldn't actually see it. So,
because everything was done separately. But
yeah. So I was thinking about this because I had this conversation about digital rights management earlier today. And
what does that mean?
Well, let's say, back in the day when we used to download MP3s or movies.
You mean make emergency copies?
Emergency copies, yeah.
Emergency backups.
And then share your emergency copies with other people. That whole process of streaming and downloading the MP3s, you can actually see it, right? You can fingerprint it, you can see the entire file. But then what these pirates did was they started to break it up into chunks.
Oh, like torrents?
There you go. And so that's how BitTorrent was. And now you're downloading different chunks from different places, and it's harder to track. So they kind of did the same thing with this by sending it different commands in different chunks.
Oh, so instead of like downloading one major file, one full version.
Well, instead of making one killer bot, they made all these pieces of an AI system that did different things, but as a whole acted as one.
Yeah. So it's like almost undetectable. It's kind of like there's a lot of times where a lot of shady businesses are compartmentalized. I think actually the cartel, like a lot of the cartel business related stuff is like I keep saying it's compartmentalized because it's like they don't want one group talking to another, right? Or people break up teams so that way someone that does one task doesn't talk to a team that does another task, and then they realize that if you do A plus B plus C, you get this outcome, right? And they keep those people separate in doing what they're doing because they don't want to. If essentially, like interestingly, like the way the cartels are set up is if one set of these, like one of these silos goes down, it doesn't affect the others. And it doesn't actually lead to those other people being implicated. So
you sound like you know a lot about cartels.
Yeah. This is the third or fourth episode, Fern, where you've given us an education on the cartels. I'm going to have to pick your brain offline here.
So
what you know.
So we've watched Narcos on Netflix. So we have a cat. My cat's name is Don Juan because we were watching Narcos like 3 or 4 years ago. So we watched the Pablo Escobar one. So that one, the Mexican, the Sinaloa, it's like all these different ones. We kind of watched them on Netflix. And then I spent some time reading stuff. But what I remember reading was they had compartmentalized a lot of their stuff, and they were known for that because purposely, if someone were to fail, it wouldn't, defense in layers or security in layers. So they've in a lot of ways applied like security to their business. And if something breaks, they're good.
And I think that's very similar to what we saw earlier that I talked about with the different compartmentalization of the kill chain, where you have initial access brokers, or you have the people doing reconnaissance, you have the people, setting up command and control, and then also the exfiltration. So you have that. So if one piece of that chain fails, you don't lose the whole chain, right? But in this case, I think, perhaps Claude is not a malicious LLM, but we are moving towards a future where people are going to house their own, private LLMs for this purpose. You're going to have entire LLMs built for, offensive security, or in this case, offensive, just cybersecurity compromise.
So before we get too deep into all of that, I think the most interesting part for me on initially how this happened is they pretended to be a legitimate pen testing organization doing like,
or they convinced the AI they were legitimate.
Yeah. So hey, we're just doing this stuff, blah 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 blah, and the AI is like, okay, cool.
Like if you were to ask, let's say you go to ChatGPT or Grok and you say, if I were a bank robber, how would I break into this bank, or how would I get funds?
Yeah. Or imagine when people do stuff online, they say this is for educational purpose only.
Yeah.
So essentially that's what they did, is they said, hey, tell us what you know. Or essentially, like, obviously, like I said, I'm finding recipes on ChatGPT. I'm not using it like this in any way, shape, or form. But it is interesting because I have seen things where people say, hey, imagine you are a expert in this field, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. This whole prompt thing is kind of not new to me, but
well, I think that the cooking thing is different because that's a actual physical thing, right? You have to say, I want to cook or I want to bake a pie. Give me the ingredients I need and the steps, but it can't actually make it for you. I think in this case, right, if you're doing recon and you're doing software, it can actually build you the tool, right? So you can say, I want to do recon. How would I do that? And it would say, well, maybe you go to Burp Suite, maybe you do this. And then you can just say, well, can you create the code for me? And it will just do it. But in the cooking instance, it can't do it for you, right? In the virtual world, it can do everything for you.
Yeah. And especially if you're posing as a legitimate company, it has no reason to set off an alarm. So my first interesting question was, did Claude mess up here in not setting something in place to say, hey, anything around pen testing, red teaming specifically, like guardrails?
That's a tricky one. That's a real tricky one because that gets into too much oversight or looking at what you're doing. I mean, are you worried that the government's watching what you're doing, what you're asking ChatGPT today? I mean, yeah, if you're asking to make weapons of mass destruction, probably it should, right? For the better of society. But I think in this case, maybe you're right. If it looks like something malicious, it should be called out. But it sounds like these guys dodged that by breaking up the malicious task into different segments.
Yeah. So 90% of the work was done by AI. So normally when stuff like this happens, humans are in the loop for what percentage of the time would you say?
Right now?
Yeah.
For any organization, you're still below 50%. So you may only have 20% automated.
Oh, so 20% automated, 80%
human.
A person is there.
Yeah, but that's on the business side, and we know that we're behind the attackers on the business side.
So basically, the number's flipped.
Yeah, like so, Troy. Like how much you think you could automate today in a SOC? Like fully
that's a good question. I think that automation and AI SOC is a big topic right now in the venture world because of this very reason. We need to be able to outpace the AI and for good, right? So the blue team or the AI SOC. Right now, I mean, in my last role, my last two roles or three, automation was a key project for us, but it was a very manual process. you really have to dissect a business process and then say, how do I automate the steps here? Wasn't easy, but now it's getting easier with AI. So I think that, we definitely have some advantages, but that's why you start seeing all these companies pop up in the AI SOC space. I think it's going to be absolute game changer and a necessity for most companies to have something like that you can combat at machine speed.
Yeah, you have to improve. I think right now, if I were to guess, 20 to 30% of any traditional SOC is automated, or less than that is probably AI, like agentic AI.
Yeah, and let's be clear here. The 20% of stuff that you are automating is all mundane, easy, click, click, click. You're not automating the heavy stuff that actually takes a human's intervention or, intelligence to look at and discern. So
yeah,
I still think there's a lot to learn there. That's where AI is going to help us.
Yeah, I think we're making predictions for 2026. That's one area that would probably grow quite a bit. And most organizations have to figure this out, because if the attackers are doing the reverse, 80% automated versus 20% human interaction, that is a huge advantage.
Yeah, because you're basically just trying to play catch up, right? Because so in this thing, it says it's reconnaissance, vulnerability discovery, payload crafting, and planning was all done by AI. And the only part that humans did was actually picking the target, as in the organization that they were targeting, and the final approval on execution. So the person that was involved basically said, I want that company, go. Right? I'm sure that's obviously like very anecdotal, but that's kind of like what it was. And when you look at it on the business side, on we'll say the defending side, it's not like that. It's all these logs, all this information. I have to parse through all this. Oh, there's this alert. And it's just like an onslaught, I don't even know how people would ever sleep, right? Especially if, I don't know. It just seems like a very terrible situation to be in.
Yeah, and remember, the hackers only have to be right once. We have to be right all the time. So not only are the odds stacked against us, we also have to be right always. And the hackers just have to find one vulnerability, one entry point to really get into our environment and set a foothold. Finding backdoors, finding people who have left a way to get back in, etc. Is so important, because you have to make sure you're getting these people out and they don't have a way to call back in.
So how do you even defend against something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy button. And we've known that. I think what we have to do now as an industry is to speed up the advancements. And like Troy said, I think there's a lot of these new organizations that are trying to help automate SOC or add some more AI or agentic AI within the SOC, but it doesn't stop in the SOC, right? There's the entire, when we talk about the 14 domains of cybersecurity, well, probably add AI into all 14 somewhere, right?
Yeah, and here's the one thing that really boggles my mind is we've got to change the company's culture to adapt quicker. And it was always a problem in every company to help the IT team patch faster, to identify, especially 0 days, highs and criticals that are externally facing, and move to patch those faster. These bad guys have a very good attack surface management detector, as Fern said, do that reconnaissance. They can see all of my assets that are publicly facing. And if one of those happens to have a 0 day from one of the vendors out there that is not patched, and it's a way for the bad guys to get into my environment, every minute that is available to them as an attack path, I am vulnerable. And so we've got to change that company culture of, well, we can wait till the next patch cycle 30 days from now, to this is important. We need to go patch it now. And we need to, prevent bad things from happening. So I just think it's really an industry cultural change, Damien, that's going to help us increase that speed.
Well, let's think about it this way from the IT side, because I'll just play the other side for you here. Obviously I don't want to go and put the latest patch on, because it may take down the entire environment.
Oh, like Cloudflare?
Yeah. I mean, that's another one last week, right? Where that was a regular update or patch that took down their service. And so that we want to avoid. But I think what we have to do is not only speed up that patching, but speed up the testing.
Testing.
Yeah. So if we can automate, think about it this way, How many times have you updated your iPhone?
When it tells me to.
When it tells you to. There you go. All right. So I think it's really easy to have a system to say, okay, here's a new patch. I'm going to automatically apply it in our testing environment. I'm going to automatically test it for you with all the functionality.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to say, here you go. I tested it. Just click apply to production.
Yeah, exactly. That regression testing is so important to also automate. You know, a lot of IT folks really are afraid of how it's going to impact their environment, but that fear turns into crisis quickly. When you have some cyber attack that hits and it's ransomware, it's locked up, it's operational outage. So that miniature, blip that you were afraid of now becomes this monstrosity of $1 million loss for your company. I have actually seen that. I'm giving you this example from a real world scenario that I can talk about. So this is where we have to change the culture of fear to let's test, let's regression test, let's use automation to help us do that quicker, faster, stronger, and let's get this thing patched, because every minute that hole is open for hackers, they are definitely going to have that opportunity to get through. Today on the news, I saw that they're out there scanning for certain types of Palo Alto global protects. There's millions of scans going on right now. They just detected that are looking for some vulnerability that's out there. So hackers are aware of the different types of vulnerabilities, and they've set their scanners across the open internet looking for those vulnerabilities. If you happen to be the unlucky one that they find, they just push that automation script, that AI on their side, and they're able to jump in, take control of your environment, lock you out of your own firewall, and then the system is theirs.
You said that this company that you're talking about, this specific example, the biggest issue that they had was the fear of things blowing up on them, I guess.
Absolutely. Fear of patching too quickly, fear an operational outage of their sites. And what happened was they were taken over by Scattered Spider, one of our favorite threat actors, multi-million-dollar loss ransomware. They're doing a class action lawsuit right now. They're going through that process. They're doing credit monitoring. So just because their IT team was a bit slow and did not want to take a chance on a patch or testing that patch and so on, and they're, had their attorneys involved, they have general counsel with that external counsel involved. It's like massive, massive breach for them.
If they would have allowed these patches to be done sooner or tested sooner, you think they wouldn't be in that situation?
I think Damien said it best earlier. Cybersecurity is a defense in depth initiative. It's not a single thing is going to fix everything. In this specific case, they came back to that as the root cause. So I can point to it and say, yes, if they would have patched that, perhaps the threat actors wouldn't have found it. They wouldn't have gotten their way in. But it's not going to solve everybody's problem every time. And I think that having a team on both the IT and the security side who walk that balance very carefully together and say, we need to be faster and better about our patching, but we also need to be faster and better about testing its effects on our environment. That could help you kind of pave the road to success.
Okay.
And that's just patching. Like, I think even now, like we talk about visibility into, data movement, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see it before it even starts to leave, you can stop it before, data gets exfiltrated. So there's a bunch of different, exactly what Troy said. There's different defense and layers, and just because one layer failed doesn't mean that was the number one. I mean, that was the only thing that caused this to happen. Usually, it's a bunch of things that happened that did not work out.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I was thinking is when it comes to what Troy's talking about with the testing, and I feel like when it comes to vulnerability management, right, and patching, like culturally, sometimes companies choose not to do things within certain windows, right? So my question was more so trying to see, like, if as a business, there is a lack of interest in moving these changes because it could affect revenue or whatever, they may choose to opt out of doing things sooner, right? But essentially that choice to not do things sooner becomes the issue, because if these tools are being used, if Claude's being used, and I think it said it was running hundreds of thousands of tasks at a single time in the article, then that means like the ability for them to point and shoot is a lot better because they essentially have a sitting target.
Well, your risk and the amount of time you have to patch kind of shrinks, because now they can exploit that a lot quicker,
Yeah.
right?
So the longer you take to fix it, the more available time that they have to essentially just keep.
Yeah, but that's always a business decision, right?
Mhm.
It's always a risk. So if you want to be at the cutting edge and be on the latest version of all your software, there's a risk to that as well, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I guess, let me ask you this then, as maybe devil's advocate. Say this was 5 years ago. Would people be as worried about that or the snowball effect long term, or what would come downstream if there weren't tools that were just like pumping just these
No, I think that's what we're saying now, right? Because that attack can happen a lot quicker, the analysis can happen a lot quicker, that your time to patch now shrinks.
Yeah, and I'm so glad Jen Easterly, the former director of CISA, put out her article on LinkedIn about this, and it really resonated with me. And I think it's because I've been like calling this for years. This is going to happen, and I've got so many people denying it and telling me that this is never going to happen. That I'm just trying to, cry chicken little, and absolutely, this is here. It has actually, they've been using AI to some extent up to now. We've seen it in reverse engineering of patching, but it is here. Now it's even here to the point of end to end. AI is going to be able to, point and shoot. So we need to, really reframe our thoughts about how our team responds. We need to arm our teams with, AI that's working for us in the SOC and in our endpoints and our servers, our websites, our cloud. We need to arm ourselves with the best technology to put a bubble around our employees. And we need to then use AI to help us sort through that data in the SIM or wherever you collect it to stitch together those disparate pieces of information that you might miss, a human could miss, and then be able to tell a story that is impactful and can actually stop things before they happen. So there's, you got to build these defenses in depth, follow a framework like NIST, and then put the best protections in place. If companies are serious about protecting their data and their systems, they would really build out a robust, platform or team around this whole thought process.
Yeah, we talked about the SOC AI agents. I think that's just one component of it. The problem with that right now is that I don't know if everyone trusts their data, or even if they have all of their data to make the right decisions.
like
100%. Absolutely. That's the number one key. And then we tried OCSF. Remember 3 or 4 years ago, I was on that council for Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, putting data from every technology into a single schema that we could actually parse and do it. But, vendors and people have really resisted putting all of the data into the same format because it's their proprietary, if our data is in our own format, you have to use our tools to sort it.
Yeah.
We need to be more open about that.
So that was one
problem.
That you bring up a good point there. That is one problem, is that every tool has a different format for their logs. And so we tried to standardize that, and it didn't really work out. And then the other part of this problem is that every tool generates a ton of data. And trying to store it and trying to find, let's say, you put it into a SIM, but that's expensive. It could be slow. And then you can only analyze it with that analytics tool. And then you'd probably have to use their AI, right? So it's not very, I don't know, say less collaborative or integrated so that we can use it a lot easier.
And that's by design. That is absolutely by design. And I'm not calling out any specific vendor here, but that is by design. If you keep your logs in your own format so that only your tools and SIM can read it appropriately and do all the fancy AI stuff on top of it, you lock your customers into your platform. So I think that we need, as a society, as a industry, to call ourselves out and make sure that we can do this as a universal means of being able to correlate threats across all technologies from the endpoints to the cloud. That's number one. Number two is, you have to be able to, and I think, Damien, that the AI SOC of the future that we keep talking about, we've seen at least 9 different players recently in this segment that are doing very well. I think they're going to be able to parse data from any source. So we're going to kind of break those walls down that the vendors have been putting up for us for so long. So now the AI is going to be able to read data from different technologies and stitch those events together, so that an IP address is an IP address and a host name is a host name. And then I have to wonder what the correlation is across those logs.
Yeah, but I want to correct you there too. I don't think all of them are looking at the log problem. I agree there's maybe a dozen out there that are looking at the AI and the Agentic AI, trying to automate that stuff. But
Mhm.
the log piece is actually really is key here, right?
Mhm.
Because that, if you think about it, what's the most expensive use of your dollars in the SOC?
It's in data
Storage?
retention.
It's a
Yeah.
SIM.
Storage.
Yeah, it's a SIM because the SIM is charging you per gig ingested.
Of throughput, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you have certain providers, right? And if you have to make a copy of that and put it somewhere else, then you're like,
Well, then they like Troy said, right? Then they lock you into their ecosystem. They want you to stay there. And how hard is it for you to copy all that data out?
And how many CISOs do you know, Damien, like I do, that can't bring in all the data they want to bring in, that they need to bring in because they just can't afford it? So they start making decisions on which data they want to store. And then they really have to take a risk by not bringing in certain data, maybe Web3 data or something else from their HTTP, post requests that they don't bring in because they just don't have the space for it. And all of a sudden you have an investigation that you need that data. You don't have it all the time.
So think about this. If you had all of your data in one location, it would be really easy for an attacker to get into your environment and just plug in their AI into your single data source or data repository.
I don't know if it'd be easy, but they certainly could. That would be
But it'd be
an attack
easier.
But I don't think that, a SIM necessarily is the right answer. You have federated search where you don't even have to store data in a central repository. Now you have AIs that can reach out via APIs and query the data where it's at rather than having to move it or store it. I think that's also a part of the future here where you're not moving data unnecessarily, or as Fern mentioned, God forbid, having duplicate copies of data. That is asinine, excuse the French, but if you've got 2 copies of your data anywhere, you should be looking at that as a way to save money.
Well, one of the things I was looking at the article was that they were using the MCP, which is Model Context Protocol, and so a lot of tools now have the MCP that allows you to essentially just query their product. So I think that may have given them a lot more access to data across and keep information in memory. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with MCP servers over the next year.
so they were essentially using it like a search bar.
Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah, there needs to be, and I don't know, I haven't seen any, and Troy, maybe you have. I know there has been some startups talking in the space where they would do security around those
Yes.
those servers.
Yeah, I have one that I'm talking to next week. As a matter of fact, it sounds very promising. I think protecting the MCP server, the interface basically with these LLMs is so crucial because you're basically, it's an API to an LLM that you can now use your own data and not have to worry about using the public side of it.
Yeah. And I mean, in addition to that, non-human identities, right? Because essentially these are all non-humans. So how do you make sure you have the right access to these NHIs? And should they have access to your MCP?
I was just looking at it right here. It says thousands of API requests per second. Or thousands.
So nobody was monitoring.
No. So one of the outcomes of this is they are now setting limits or a suspicious, monitoring of the suspicious activity on what those API requests look like.
I'm also curious what Claude is doing. I know they had no culpability here. They did chunk it up and they changed it. I'm just wondering if Claude is going to look into this and see if there's a way they could have detected this earlier.
I don't think it's Claude only, right? You have to. I mean, yeah, this incident was Claude, but I mean, it applies to any other real LLM that's out there.
Mm-hmm. And my fear was always that they're going to build their own. That we have state-sponsored threat actors that have almost an unlimited budget to go out and build their own LLM. They don't need Claude. They can use their own. But now here we see them taking advantage of the public LLM infrastructure. That's very interesting as well.
Did you see the part where they talked about the AI wrote its own evasion logic on the fly?
Yeah, I mean, it has to think on its own to get to 90% without a human.
That just seems so wild to me that there is something out there that is like doing all this, and it's like, whether it's good or bad, right? Whether it has, context on what's good or bad.
It's like that if we send a bot to go break into a house and it came up with, just in case the police come, this is what I should do to evade it, not get caught.
Yeah, but we also saw, AI do some funny things with trying not to get shut off. You see it, looking through people's emails and trying to blackmail people so they don't turn off the AI. So we know that AI can be independent of thought and have some pretty negative outcomes that are not, in the favor of humans, let's say. So we should definitely be aware of that. It's like Skynet, as you mentioned earlier, for sure.
How did they turn off Skynet again?
I don't know. Did they ever? Because there's like 20 Terminator movies. I think they're still trying to figure out how to.
Well, the whole premise was he came from the future to stop
the birth.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that never happened. And then in one of them, he ends up becoming one of them.
So can we do we need to develop time machines to go back to stop OpenAI?
Yeah, I was going to say, we know that doesn't happen because Sam Altman is still here with us, and OpenAI is still thriving. So I think we've already passed the point of that singularity
in our timeline. Yeah,
yeah.
Alternate time universe, and yeah.
I think I saw some random Joe Rogan clip where he said AI is like a future religion. It's just in the future, and it created itself now, and then 50 years or whatever, it's going to be like the new religion. Very interesting thing, but yeah, I can't think of anything that can stop it feels like a runaway train at this point to me. It's out there, it's going to keep getting better, and the people that are using it for malicious purposes have the advantage, and the people that are trying to stop that are at the disadvantage because they're stuck maybe in some ways separating, as Larry says, signal from the noise, right?
I think this is honestly no company is going to give up. They're not going to say, "Oh, okay, let me open my doors. Come on in, steal whatever you want."
No,
I mean, in some states that happens, but I'm saying in a normal business, you would probably say, "Look, I need to get better.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have better defenses. We got to be faster." And I think this opens up the door for a lot of people starting their cyber careers because, I mean, these happen, every 20 years, a technology shift?
I don't know. I think AI is like an industrial revolution in some ways.
Like the internet.
It's been coming 100 years.
Yeah, like the internet. So then, when the internet came about and everything started to get connected openly, that was one of those revolutions that changed technology a lot. So yeah, I think we're there this is 30 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this also might be the storm before the calm. We might be, trudging forward to a world where AI becomes so good that cyber attacks are no longer possible. And I think that's where we're all trying to get to, is where you have a single platform for cybersecurity, and that threat actors can no longer, use AI to get around it because the AI on our side is so good. Maybe. I mean, I really feel like we should be able to get to that point at some point. We've been doing this for a long time. Hopefully we can find a solution that really stops this completely.
Yeah, I think what you described is the movie Minority Report, where it can sense people about to do bad things and it just stops them before they do it. So it's like the AI knows that someone else has AI that's going to do some bad AI things, and they're like, no, good AI, boom, stop.
Yeah, or maybe like the Iron Dome, right? I think that every shot that comes at it is stopped, and at some point it just becomes economically non-feasible to continue trying if you never get through. So the bad guys are motivated by money, and if they can no longer make money and no longer be successful at these attacks, I think that they would stop. So hopefully we'll get there for sure.
I don't know how you guys sleep at night. This was, yeah. If I was in your shoes, Damien,
yeah, I mean, if you're up for a challenge, right? That's why we're in cybersecurity. That's why we do what we do.
I know what you're saying. For it's like a daunting task, right? But honestly, our whole career has been that way, right? We've been up against an adversary that has more means and technology than we do, and we just have to keep going. Hopefully, we can leverage technology to our favor. We've always been overpowered by the other side, but we have people on this side who are mission driven, who want to protect a company, want to protect data, systems, people, lives. And so I have great hope for our industry, and it's a reward to come to this job every day.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if we'll ever get to this, but Troy, do you think there needs to be a government framework or more intervention where we don't allow attackers, or we find ways to not allow attackers to use public LLMs. And I mean, I know the downside to that is they're just going to develop their own and we're not going to have access to it. But for now, right, do you think there needs to be more oversight?
That's a slippery slope, because what happens with oversight is you have to take resources away from fighting fires to, pen and paper documentation exercises, which is never good. But I do think that we need a framework by the government that helps us make sure that we are being compliant with all the things that we need to do in this industry. And if stopping bad guys from using LLMs is part of that, then absolutely. But wouldn't the companies themselves want to police that? Or are they just not financially motivated to make that change for the good?
I see.
I still have this faith in goodness out there.
I do see. There's a lot of organizations that won't do anything unless it's mandated. That's just, if there's no regulations that say I don't need to do it, maybe I won't do it. I'll take the risk. Mm-hmm. So I think that mentality is still there for some companies.
Like if you know someone's so for example, I don't know if this is the best example, but we'll just say weapons, right? Weapons are for protecting yourself or protecting your family or but if you put a weapon in front of someone that has a criminal history, it would be looked at as a bad decision, right? When you go to purchase a gun, if you have a criminal history, like to my knowledge, you can't purchase a gun.
I know, but people get around that because they get somebody else to buy them the gun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So even if you were to do what Troy said, or I think you might mention it, Damian, is you make it to where access to these tools isn't as easy as it is today, there's just still going to be a workaround. So like, is the thought then why even bother?
Well, I mean, to that point, we need speed limits, right? There's speed limits out there. They save lives. I think there has to be some regulation around this that, is reasonable. But we don't want to get into an overregulated world where it stifles innovation, because what's going to happen is, let's say the United States decides to overly regulate AI. Countries like China and others may have this unnecessary advantage to, continue to grow and build and learn because they don't have the guardrails we have. So I think regulation is smart, and I think it's important, especially in these cases, Damian, but overregulation can be a big problem.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess in my mind, I'm thinking, like, if someone's going to do terrible things with technology, like, how do you stop that? But I guess it's just one of those things you can't, slippery slope, right?
Yeah. It just slow them down. But I mean, it's temporary too, because they'll find, like you said, they'll find a way around it.
Yeah.
But it will give organizations the chance to catch up. Right. So we'll have more time to develop these startup companies that can help us through, more accessible AI for defense. Mm-hmm. And then organizations just have to step up and start to become faster and more efficient at defending. Right. And then hopefully by then you've slowed them down enough where now the problem though is they go underground, they build their own LLM. And they're starting to use that, but is it going to be as good? I don't know.
Yeah, probably not. Something that doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know if either of you guys might have the answer, is if something's running 1,000 API requests a second, right? Is there nothing on the provider or the LLM side that can say, hey, not that the amount of influx is like suspicious, but more so the fact that all these different things are being done, and would they not have to come from a different IP address to kind of mask that? Or
yeah, but I mean, you can't track things by IP address anymore, right? People could use a VPN, or they could look at the whole North Korean workers, right? They just had somebody host the laptops for them, work from there. So
yeah,
you can't. That's not an exact way to stop an attack.
Yeah, and think about scale too. I mean, they're talking about 1,000 per second, but we don't know if that is medium small, large. Maybe other companies are doing 1 million plus API calls per second. I mean, we have no idea to understand the scale of what that means in the scheme of normal everyday work. Because believe it or not, a lot of information transits across APIs, just like packets in a stream on the internet. So that could be relatively normal and may not raise any red flags.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe that's where I was thinking. It's like earlier when we talked about how the vendors have their IP or the proprietary information on all the data that they collect on their customers, right? Like the big vendors, right? They'll have all these logs, have all this information. They have this context, and they can kind of like make decisions or like tell customers certain things about what's going on, either with a customer in the same field or like a different person or different organization, because they have the context. So my thought here was more so like, wouldn't these LLMs have access to all this stuff being done? And if they do, that's fine. But like Damien said, you can't necessarily track it. So that means that the infrastructure has to be fairly significant, because it has to be coming from so many different places that it's hard to kind of associate everything, is maybe what I was thinking. Like this just isn't a small operation, I guess is what I'm getting at. But I've never seen like the stuff like Troy's seen. So to me,
well, when there's money involved, I mean, they'll treat that side of it as a business as well. Mm-hmm. So if there's money to be made, they'll make investments.
Yeah, I think I'm more interested in like what some of this infrastructure looks like. Like I talked earlier about the cartels, and apparently I know too much from Netflix and maybe a little bit of internet searching. But now I'm kind of curious on what this stuff looks like when people build it. To do exactly this, like, what does this look like? Do you guys know anyone that can talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if you're doing penetration testing and you have these AI models, you're probably standing up a server farm, whether it's in Amazon. So you can stand up 10 servers. They all have different different purposes. And then you're load balancing all the tasks between those servers. Now, those servers can be in your own data center. You can have them in the closet next to you. They could be in a cloud somewhere, whether it's Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Oracle, or whatever. But you have this infrastructure of compute, the servers, and then you have storage for those servers, and then you have the network layer, and that network layer is the one that goes out and does all the calls and so on. So it's just like setting up any business with a services layer, data layer, database layer. Just like you're building a website for e-commerce. I mean, no different. So it depends on how much you scale. You can have a load balancing for the servers as you grow, So I think they run it, as Damien said, like a business. You're going to see it, the infrastructure is going to look exactly the same.
Or it doesn't have to look the same. They could run it covertly and take compute from different organizations that they already have access to, right? Look at the botnets that are running in compromised routers or compromised IoT devices.
The challenge with that is, with this much firepower, the user would see degradation. They start, finding out what's wrong with their stuff, I think. But, if they can somehow, siphon off or put a QoS on their CPU usage, quality of service measurement, they maybe can siphon off little bits here and there. We see that a lot with the Mirai botnet as an example, and other things where you're going to do a denial of service attack. But for true compute and analytics, I mean, you could have a whole server farm of ARMs, ARM architecture, or Intel NUCs as an example. So there's a variety of way to get that compute. I don't know that we'll ever know exactly what it looks like. Have you ever seen the cell phone farms that are, all the trolls online? It could look like something like that as well. So, PS5s, I've seen people chain together, gaming devices so they could use the GPUs out of there for compute. So, I mean, it could really look like anything, Fern.
I think that'd be like a wild conversation, or like to either visually see it or just kind of like understand how much money goes into this.
I don't know if it's, I mean, I think you're envisioning something that's
more than it is.
Yeah. Like I'm going to go to Disneyland and see all this cool stuff, but in reality, it's probably not like that. It's, Troy was saying, if your machine is compromised, you might see some degradation, but that's not always the case. I think for the most part, they can use the spare CPU cycles. Remember, and Troy, I don't know if you ever used the SETI at home. Remember that?
The who?
Mm-mm.
So it was the SETI project where they were looking for extraterrestrial intelligence, and it scans radio waves in space. But they didn't have enough compute. So what they did was they made this home client, and then they would send you chunks of data to analyze, but it would just run in the background on your computer. It's like people now will hack your computer and put a miner, a crypto miner.
Yeah, I would say
right?
It sounds like Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, so they do that now. But back in the day, I think this was probably like late 90s, we had SETI at home. And so you could install the client and get your chunk of data. And hopefully you were the one that would discover,
life.
not life, but alien communications. Right? Wouldn't it be cool to say, yeah, this person in Las Vegas on their home computer identified. Now, I don't know what happened to that project, but that client was like the first real distributed compute, and it would only use on the unused cycles within your computer. So if you were doing something intensive, it would back off.
Yeah. So essentially, it's like the BitTorrent, right? Is everything? It's instead of like the file, it's now the infrastructure.
Distributed compute.
Oh man, this is blowing my mind. I mean, because it's like you don't necessarily even need to have the infrastructure. If you have something that can go out and find vulnerable systems, set up shop, you now just basically just use those and leverage those, right?
Less likely that you get caught, because if you think about it, if you had a data center full of equipment, that anchors you somewhere.
Most of it is cloud or disposable, so they can just turn off the lights and leave in an instant.
I will say this, and I've heard this a lot, and maybe this is kind of where we wrap it up, is there's a lot of talk on vendors saying AI this, AI that, shiny this, shiny that. But as our good friend Ashley says, you just got to get back to the basics, right? I think she said, you just got to block and tackle. You have to do the things that are like basic. Make sure everything is set up correctly. Make sure you take the time to educate your team, because this technically was the first ever known situation of this happening. Will it be the last one? Definitely not. But is there more opportunity for people to break into an unpatched firewall? 100%. Right? Is there more opportunity for someone to break into a user leaving their laptop at a Starbucks unlocked? 1,000%, right? So it comes back to this whole managing risk versus impact, right? And although it's the first and it's scary, the likelihood of this actually having the same implication as an executive leaving their laptop unlocked or their email unlocked.
Well, and that you might say, okay, I'm going to leave this laptop unlocked while I just walk 20 feet over there and come back. The problem, like that might be acceptable, but the problem is now you've got this, this person that can come in a second, access your laptop and leave. They're much faster, right? So, in the security operations world, we have really two really important metrics. One is mean time to detect. And if your average time to detect that issue is too long, you now give the attackers, a lot of freedom. And because AI is moving so much quicker, what we thought was acceptable, like a 20-foot distance, walking away from your laptop was probably acceptable, probably not acceptable anymore.
No, because all they have to have now is a little thumb drive, just pop it in the side, and then just like pull it out.
So the second metric, other than the mean time to detect, is the dwell time. So the dwell time is how long you detect it. Now you dwell on it for how long before you actually take action.
The funny thing about that, Damien, and this needs to be said because I think the industry really brushes over that metric, dwell time. And I think the IBM Pwnymon Institute said the average dwell time is around 6 months, 180 days, right? But what I find in investigations is that they're always looking for patient zero. They're always looking for that initial entry. And they tend, incident responders, whether it's, outsourced or internal, tend to kind of focus down a rabbit hole and a tunnel vision pretty quickly. And they may find that patient zero, but that might not be the first time the threat actors interacted with that machine. That might be the day it got infected. So so that you could say the dwell time is from the date of infection. But what you find if you look even further back in time is that the employee was emailing with this person, or was, the threat actor was kind of probing at this device somehow, some way. So is the dwell time really the initial breach to discovery, or is it the interaction time? Because if you could stop it further left, shift left, you could actually reduce that, prevent it from happening in the first place. Pre-crime, basically, as Fern says.
Minority Report. Left of boom. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I guess so. Just kind of temperature checking. When this article or when the story came out, like, personal opinion, like, from each of you, when you heard the story and you read more about it, like, what are your first thoughts? Like, as VP, right?
Mm-hmm.
20.
I don't know. Troy, you start, because you're the one that actually saw the article first.
Oh yeah, and then he wrote his own article.
I was going to say, Fern, this was not a sigh of relief, but I was so glad to see it, because we've been screaming this is coming for so long. Like I said, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. This is going to happen. Finally, somebody, Anthropic, documented it very well. They found it. They saw it. They were able to publish this paper, and it was highlighted by security experts out there. So my point is, this was exactly what we needed to really go back and sell to our internal teams. I am not crazy. This is coming. It's already here on our doorstep. We need to move faster and think about our culture here. Kind of move people out of the 90s and into the 2020s.
Wow, you can hear the excitement in his voice.
Yeah, as he's describing, it's like, you sound like someone that just hasn't had, like, you haven't had a yes in the boardroom for the, like, yes, you get that budget.
The board is always amenable. Honestly, I've never had a no in the boardroom, to be honest with you. But I think it's because we do our homework and present things that make a ton of sense, right? And people, if you talk to your board, make sure that you're speaking their language, which is finance, risk, dollars, not bits and bytes, because you'll lose them. But, I think this really validates what we've been saying for so long. So I was happy to see the article. Glad somebody documented it well.
Yeah, it was a good document too, because it's like 12 or 13 pages. So it is a document, not just a one pager. But my initial reaction was, is this real? Like, have they already gotten there? It's just crazy that they've already gotten there now. But then I got into thinking, well, if the attackers can do this and go 90% fully automated, then, now I want to get from 30% to like 60% on the defensive side. Yeah. And it's totally doable.
Yeah.
All right. It just takes some effort and some practice and playing around. But it's possible if these guys can do it, and they don't have a ton of resources. It's probably, we picture the kid in their mom's basement. It's probably more sophisticated than that, but they still don't have, I don't know, if some of these large organizations that have hundreds of people in their SOC or hundreds of security engineers, somebody should be able to develop something on the defensive side to help us catch up a lot quicker.
Yeah. So it's kind of like silver lining is what I'm hearing. So Troy is excited because it's like proof of what has been shouted. Like, hey, look, this is now, like, it's not just me saying it. We're not crying wolf. Here is the article. Here is the proof. And here is, documentation of it, right? This is here and it's here to stay, and it's probably going to get worse, right? Potentially. But then it's also like, well, if they can do it, that means we can too. And if we're not optimized, that means, or if we're at a point where, like you said, it's like 20 or 30%, you can get it 40, 50, 60, right? And it just goes back to just doing more with less. So I guess sometimes, it might feel like you're losing the battle, but if you look at it in terms of the tools that each side has, or the weapons that they have, it's the same weapon, right? So all you really have to do is just use your weapon better, right? Or learn how to use your weapon to improve your chances of winning, right? So it does suck if you look at it from the defensive, or if you look at it as a defensive person.
It's just like be challenged and feel like you're challenged to go and make it better on the defensive side
with the same tools. Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
So that's why you show up every day, because it's not that you're losing. You have access to the same tools. You just have to figure out how to use them to win. And I like that. I don't know. I don't have anything to add. I just was curious on what you guys thought. So, you guys, any closing thoughts on anything else that we covered today?
No, I think, I mean, obviously this is a great topic. We'll see, where we get to next year. But like Troy said, I think there's a lot of players coming up in the Agentic AI space, especially around the SOC. Let's see how those develop, how many organizations actually adopt them. And then we got to really address the logging problem.
Yeah.
You got too much data. If you got too much data, you just can't get through it, even with AI. And then sometimes you're missing data, right? So maybe the way we handle our logs today in a SIEM isn't the right approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my thoughts are: assume breach. They're already in there. Go find them. Threat hunt, threat hunt, threat hunt. That's my whole goal, and start looking for this activity now.
Final thought. What's the over-under, since Troy lives in Vegas, what's the over-under on the second instance of this happening, coming out? So we just had the first. You talk about mean time to I always think of mean time to remediate, right? In terms of like security. What do you think the mean time to occurrence for the second one? I just made that up.
The next occurrence.
Yeah.
I think there's two parts to that question. When will it occur? And when will we see
out?
it? Yeah, we find out that it occurred. So I don't know when we'll find out that it occurred, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is already another instance running there.
Oh yeah,
in ChatGPT or Grok or Gemini or
some of these
Llama.
tools.
Yeah, you don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're lucky that Anthropic actually did the documentation here. This has probably been happening. This is the first documented case of it, but it's probably not the first case of it.
Oh.
And the second, third, fourth are probably happening right now. There's no doubt that these things are happening. That's what we have to be aware of, is that this stuff is happening right now. With incident response and breaches, a lot of companies do not report breaches because they don't want the fallout, the brand reputation risk and all that stuff. So, same thing happens here. If this is happening, we're not hearing about it. And I think that you should just take away from this that it's very well documented now. This is happening. It's not a myth. And it's happening a lot more frequently than we would like to assume.
It may have already happened in a different LLM and they didn't draw attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
anyways, bravo to Anthropic for bringing it out and doing the report.
Bottom line is we're here. So get ready. Right. And I guess with that, we'll just see you next week.